Hi guys, it's Ms. Ayers again. This is our second persuasive essay video, and in this video we'll be talking about appeals to reason. The appeals to reason are very important. The appeals to reason are where you'll be laying out most of your argument for your persuasive essay. So make sure you're paying attention to this and you do a good job. You might remember from our last video, I was attempting to convince Mr. Kruger to drop Henry David Thoreau from his American literature class and start teaching Edith Wharton. In that video, I talked about coming up with a convincing concession to the opposition. And we were pretty successful in the last video. I think by the end of the video, Mr. Kruger was saying, "All right, Ayers, I'm listening." So now it's time to take the next step and get into our appeals to reason. Okay, let's start by defining what I mean by appeals to reason. Your appeals to reason deal with your use of logic to explain your perspective to your audience. Also with your appeals to reason, for this assignment, you need to make sure that you're using the graduate at graduation to explain why your reader should adopt your change. So why the thing you want the reader to do will ultimately fulfill prep's mission with the graduate at graduation. Standardizing our language that way will help you and me get on the same page to determine how successfully you're using logic to make your points. So let's get into this. Here's a quick review of the graduate at graduation. We at Prep are hoping that by the time you graduate, you will be open to growth, intellectually competent, loving, religious, and committed to doing justice. If I'm honest with myself, I can't use all 5 of the pillars of the grad at grad to convince Mr. Kruger to drop Henry David Thoreau in favor of Edith Wharton. The way I see it, only 3 of these reasons work well: open to growth, intellectually competent, and committed to doing justice. Honestly, I'm not worried about that because I know it's better to have fewer strong arguments that I can explain in persuasive detail than it is to have several really lame arguments. So I'm not that worried that I'm not going to be able to use all 5 elements of the grad at grad. I'm going to stick to the ones I can use best, and that's what I suggest you do. So for example, if I'm talking about openness to growth to Mr. Kruger, I might say to him, "Hey Jim, I know Henry David Thoreau is a great writer, but he's also a very famous writer. American literature students everywhere read Henry David Thoreau. Edith Wharton is not as widely read. So by asking our students to read Edith Wharton, we're pushing them to grow in new ways that they may not have grown before. So Edith Wharton would allow some openness to growth that maybe our students haven't encountered, and we certainly want them to encounter because that's the first element of our graduate at graduation. In terms of intellectual competence, I'm likely to say to Mr. Kruger, you know, Jim, Henry David Thoreau is a tough writer. He's a very demanding writer. But the same thing is true of Edith Wharton. She's another one of those writers with those stellar vocabularies that will really push our students to learn. The ideas she deals with are really critical of her culture, much like Henry David Thoreau was. So at the very least, if we drop Thoreau in favor of Wharton, our students won't lose any ground in terms of intellectual competence. They'll still be working at the same high level we want them to work at. And then for being committed to doing justice, I think I'm likely to tell Mr. Kruger, "Jim, you know, Henry David Thoreau is a great author and everything, and he has a great message. He's a tough guy to read. He'll make our students stronger. However, Henry David Thoreau is another dead white guy from Harvard University. In the 19th century American literature classroom, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a dead white guy who went to Harvard. Edith Wharton would bring an understudied female presence to our class, and gender equity is a good thing. It's the just thing to do. And so how about we drop the dead white guy for the dead white lady? At this point, I think Kruger would probably start going, I love dead white guys. But I don't know. Hopefully he'd still be listening. It'd be tough to argue against that. Now, Mr. Kruger and I may have different tastes in literature, but we both appreciate a logical argument and reasonable discussion. So I'm hoping that my appeals to reason are working. And if you take a look at Mr. Kruger in this picture, I've literally never seen him this happy. I would also like to note that in this picture, I am actually pointing at Mr. Kruger with my index finger. I realize now as I look at this picture, it may not look that way, but I swear that's what I'm doing. So, sorry, Jim, for how that picture looks. I want to give you a little bit of caution as you do this, though. It's going to be really important that you watch your tone even while you're working with your appeals to reason. You're not in your concession to the opposition anymore, but if your language gets insulting or condescending, your audience is less likely to listen to you. And as soon as the audience shuts you off, you're finished. Also make sure to avoid the logical fallacies that we've talked about in class. If I go in talking to Mr. Kruger in a way that's disrespectful, or I'm using faulty arguments, I'm going to get this face out of him again, real fast. And I'm probably going to hear something like, in the 400 years I've been teaching, I've never heard anything that stupid. Get out of here. Finally, guys, don't forget to submit your assignment to Turnitin.com. Remember, I'm grading everything on Turnitin, so if you come in with a hard copy and you haven't submitted your assignment, I won't be grading it. So get that submitted. Okay, everyone, I think that's it. Obviously, see me with any questions, and good luck on your essays. And I'm sorry I can't imitate Mr. Kruger's voice that well. It's really hard to get my voice that low. Anyway, good luck, guys. Bye-bye.